Orca can kill a great white shark in 90 seconds, but when a human appears in the water, it does something that scientists cannot explain. It hunts sharks, whales, seals. It attacks animals weighing dozens of tons and emerges victorious from these encounters. But you know who it has never killed, even once in the entire history of observations in the wild? Us, humans. Zero confirmed fatal cases, zero attacks with serious consequences. Throughout the entire time that scientists have been observing orcas in the ocean, zero. And this is where something truly fascinating begins, because this animal is not some kind-hearted dolphin that likes to swim next to a boat. It is the apex predator of the planet, a being with a brain that in some respects surpasses the human one, a being that lives in a family, teaches its children, mourns the dead, and remembers everything. Why does it not touch us? Hello, this is Tomasz Yelnitsky, and this is The World Without a Filter. Today we will break down the orca into its first principles: biology, hunting, family, intelligence, and its relations with humans, which turned out to be much more complicated than anyone could have suspected. Stay until the end. There will be something there that will change your way of looking at this animal forever. Let us start with something basic but important. The orca is called the killer whale in English, and that immediately gives two misunderstandings in 3 words. First, the orca is not a whale. Second, killer, a word that paints a completely wrong picture of who it really is. The orca is the largest representative of the dolphin family. Yes, it is a dolphin, just a very, very large dolphin. Males reach 9 meters in length and weigh up to 10 tons. Females are slightly smaller, around 7 meters and 5 to 6 tons. For comparison, that is roughly the same as 2 passenger cars placed one behind the other, living cars with teeth. The nickname killer whale is not scientific, it is folk. Spanish sailors gave it to them back in the 10th century, observing how orcas attacked whales. The original Spanish name was Asesina de Ballenas, literally whale killer. Somewhere in translation the words switched places and it came out killer whale. Quite a successful mistake for a predator to whom a fearsome reputation does not really hurt. The black and white pattern on the orca's body is not just a pretty design. It is camouflage perfected over millions of years of evolution. The dark back makes the orca invisible from below. It blends into the dark depths of the ocean. The light belly is invisible from above. It merges with the bright sky above the surface. The prey does not see the orca either from below or from above until it is too late. The white patches on the sides of the body probably also help members of the pod recognize each other in murky water during hunts. Speed of 55 kilometers per hour. For a being weighing several tons, it is roughly like a truck accelerating like a sports car. The secret lies in body structure. Powerful muscles along the spine work together, with a layer of elastic connective tissue woven into the tendons like thousands of rubber strings. When the tail goes one way, the tissue stretches, and then returns it back like a slingshot. With each muscle contraction, 87% of the expended energy returns. This is almost perfect biomechanics. Engineers still study the orca's body structure as a model for movement in fluids. Where do orcas live? Literally everywhere. From the Arctic to Antarctica, from tropical seas to the icy currents off the coast of Norway. The orca is the only large marine mammal that has mastered all the oceans of the planet without exception. They are found off the coast of Kamchatka and off the coast of Patagonia, in the Mediterranean Sea, and in the Sea of Japan. Where there is water and there is food, there are orcas. Even in the Arctic, where almost no other large predators reach. Lifespan makes no less an impression than size. Males live on average 30 to 40 years. Females are a completely different story. Some females live to 90 years. 90 is comparable to human life, and this fact, as you will see shortly, has colossal significance for the entire pod. The dorsal fin of a male orca is a story in itself. It can reach almost 2 meters in height, straight, distinct, visible from afar. In females, the fin is much smaller and slightly curved. Researchers recognize specific individuals by the shape and condition of the dorsal fin, just as people recognize acquaintances by their face. Many orcas have fins with unique bends, notches, or scars by which they can be identified throughout their lives. This allows scientists to conduct long-term observations of individual families without the need to capture the animals. The diet of orcas depends on which population they belong to. Some eat only fish and can swim thousands of kilometers in pursuit of their favorite salmon. Others specialize in marine mammals, seals, sea lions, and sometimes whales. These two groups are called residents and transients. Between them, there is a gulf in behavior, in dialect, and even in genetics. They live in the same waters, see each other, and completely ignore each other. Different cultures, different worlds. Some scientists went even further in their conclusions. They claim that transient and resident orcas are not just different populations. Their culture has divided them so deeply that it is only a matter of time before they become separate species. Not because of geography, not because mountains or oceans separate them, but because culture has divided them. This is perhaps the only known example where cultural differences create a new biological species. Exactly as some human populations evolved the ability to digest lactose when cow's milk became part of the diet, orcas evolved thanks to their own choices and traditions. Now about the family, because without this, one cannot understand anything else. If you want to understand the orca, forget the image of a solitary predator. The orca is first and foremost a social, family being, and its family is organized in a way that even anthropologists have something to think about. At the foundation stands a matriarchy. The pod is led by the oldest female, not the strongest male, not the largest individual, precisely the oldest female. She remembers more than anyone. She knows where to look for food in a hungry year. She knows the migration routes of fish. She knows which places are better to avoid. Her knowledge is the collective memory of the pod accumulated over decades. When resources are scarce, pods with living oldest females find food much more effectively than those where these females are missing. And here, something absolutely astounding begins. Female orcas are among the few animals on Earth that go through menopause. This is an extremely rare phenomenon in nature. Besides orcas, it is known in short-finned pilot whales and narwhals, and in humans. In the overwhelming majority of animals, females reproduce until the end of their lives, but female orcas stop giving birth around the age of 30 to 40 years and live several more decades after that. Why? On the surface, from the point of view of evolution, it makes no sense. An individual that does not reproduce does not pass on genes further. But science has found the answer, and it is called the grandmother effect. After the female stops giving birth, she stops competing for resources with her own children and grandchildren. All her energy goes to something else. She becomes a living library of the pod. In years when salmon disappears from usual fishing grounds, it is precisely the oldest females who first know where to swim. They remember routes that have not been used for 20, 30 years, and lead the pod to places where the young have never been. Studies have shown that when the oldest female dies, mortality among her offspring in the following years rises sharply. The pod literally loses part of its collective mind. Now about the sons. Honestly, when I learned about this, I had to check it in several sources because it sounds almost unbelievable. Male orcas never leave their mother, do you understand? Never. They stay with her until her death. In most animals, males leave the family group after reaching maturity. This is the basic evolutionary strategy to prevent inbreeding. Male orcas stay with their mother, mate with females from other pods during short meetings, and return home. The consequences of this are astonishing. When the mother dies, Mortality of her adult sons rises sharply within the next 2 years. The older the son, the higher the risk. An adult male weighing 8 tons, 20 or 30 years old, and still needs his mother. This completely does not fit the ingrained ideas about predators as self-sufficient survival machines. The pod usually consists of 3 generations: grandmother, her children, and her grandchildren, all together, always close. It is called a matrilineal group. Several such groups that regularly stay together form a subpod, and several subpods form a clan. Each pod speaks its own dialect. This is not a metaphor, it is the literal truth. Scientists began recording and analyzing sounds of different pods back in the 1970s and discovered that each group has its own set of calls and whistles that others do not have. Young orcas learn the dialect from their mother and other members of the pod, just as children learn language. By the dialect, one can determine which clan a given animal belongs to. This is a cultural marker, like an accent in people from different regions. Moreover, pods with similar dialects usually have closer kinship ties. If this is a surprise for you, write in the comments. Did you know that orcas have such a complex social life? I am sure that for most this is complete news. Orcas mourn the dead. This is probably the hardest thing I learned while preparing this material. In 2018, a female from one of the Pacific pods carried the body of her stillborn calf on her nose for 17 days, not letting it go. When the body began to sink, she again and again swam to the bottom and lifted it. Other members of the pod were nearby, sometimes touching the body of the little one themselves. Researchers who observed this said that watching it without an inner tightening was impossible. Several times a year, when conditions align favorably, several subpods of one clan gather together. It is called a superpod, supergroup. Dozens and sometimes hundreds of orcas in one place. They do not hunt together. It is rather a social event. They circle, communicate, the youth play, adults renew bonds with those they have not seen for a long time. Researchers describe these meetings as something resembling a holiday, if of course one can apply such a word to orcas. But observing it, as they said, really feels that way. Orcas have hierarchy, conflicts, seniority. The oldest females direct the hunt. They make the decisions where and how to attack. The youth observe and learn. Sometimes older individuals deliberately create training situations. They release already caught prey so that the young can practice on their own. It has happened that older ones brought live prey to the young who still did not know how to hunt, as if bringing a toy to a child. This is not instinct. This is culture, passing knowledge from generation to generation. Hey, if you have reached this point, I have one request. Subscribe to the World Without a Filter channel and click the bell. I produce these materials with great care, and your subscription makes it possible for me to make more of them. Okay, back to orcas. Talking about orca behavior without talking about their brain is like discussing the operation of a computer without mentioning the processor. So, let us look inside. The orca brain weighs from 5 to almost 7 kilograms. For comparison, the human brain weighs about 1 kilogram, 400 grams. In terms of absolute brain mass, orcas rank second among all animals. They are second only to the sperm whale. But it is not only mass that counts, structure also counts. There is such an indicator, the gyrification index. It measures how strongly the cerebral cortex is folded, how many grooves and convolutions it has. The more folds, the more nerve cells fit in one volume, the faster information is processed. In humans, this index is 2.2. In bottlenose dolphins, 5.6, and in orcas, 5.7. This is the highest indicator among all animals on Earth. The orca brain is more folded than the human one. Personally, in this whole topic, this struck me the most. Not the size, not the speed, precisely this brain. a being that we have become accustomed to perceiving as simply a large fish, and it thinks, remembers, feels, and perhaps is aware of itself. What does this mean in practice? Orcas are capable of complex planning. They understand cause and effect relationships. They remember for a long time. They learn not only from their own experience, but also by observing others. They pass knowledge to the next generation. What scientists call cultural transmission of skills. Special attention deserves the insular cortex, a special brain structure that in humans is associated with self-awareness, empathy, the ability to feel the state of another being. In orcas, it is exceptionally well developed, possibly better than in any other species. This means, or at least very convincingly suggests, that orcas are capable of something like compassion. They are aware of the state of other members of the pod. Perhaps this is precisely why they help injured companions, do not abandon the weaker ones, and mourn the dead. In 2001, scientists conducted the mirror test. Bright markers were applied to orcas' bodies on dark places and dark on light, and then they were given a mirror. An animal without self-awareness perceives the reflection as another individual. An animal with self-awareness understands that it sees itself. Orcas with markers for a long time hung in front of the mirror, turned their heads, examined their markers from different angles. Before applying the markers, such behavior was not present. This is not 100% proof of self-awareness. Science is cautious in formulating conclusions, but this is a very convincing signal of a being that is aware of its own body. Researchers have also documented in orcas something that can be called long-term memory in a social context. It is known that individuals recognize each other after many years of separation. In one case, two females separated and placed in different marine parks for several years. Upon meeting again, immediately restored familiar patterns of communication as if they had never been apart. This is not just memory of a face or silhouette, this is memory of a specific personality. Now about echolocation. Orcas emit clicks, high-frequency sounds from 20 to 60 kilohertz. These clicks spread in the water, reflect off objects, and return. Specialized fatty tissue in the front part of the head, called the melon, picks up the reflected signal and transmits it to the brain. As a result, the orca receives a three-dimensional image of the surrounding space. It sees with sound, at a distance of up to 150 meters, in dark water at great depth where vision gives nothing. The most amazing thing is not the range, but the precision. Orcas can distinguish individual species of fish based on the echolocation signal. They hear the differences between king salmon and other species of salmon and deliberately hunt exactly the one they want. This is a level of sensory development surpassing the capabilities of many modern devices. In addition to clicks, orcas use whistles, short, high frequency, serving for quiet communication at close range, and still calls that carry for many kilometers in the ocean and allow pods that have moved away from each other to maintain contact. Three registers of communication, each for a different situation, like three different communication channels in one being. And now let us move on to what the orca is called the apex predator for, to hunting. Different populations have different specializations, but one thing unites them. No strategy works alone. All this is team play, and team play with planning, division of roles, and tactical corrections during the attack. Something like this in nature happens extremely rarely. The first strategy, and probably the most spectacular, is the intentional beaching. Off the coast of Argentina, in the area of the Valdez Peninsula, orcas have mastered a hunt that takes your breath away. They literally throw themselves onto the beach, grab sea lions right at the water's edge, and return to the ocean. It sounds simple. In practice, this is one of the most difficult and dangerous maneuvers in the animal world. To throw itself onto the shore and return, the orca must develop a speed of about 30 kilometers per hour, right at the water surface, precisely calculate the angle of the shore slope, hit the wave moment, and manage to turn parallel to the land before entering too shallow water. A fraction of a second, a meter of space, and everything can go wrong. If it makes a mistake, it gets stuck. Gravity begins to press on the lungs. The muscles are unable to support their own mass. Without water, the orca dies within a few hours. A mistake costs life. That is why they teach this for years. The mother first herself checks the shore again and again, tests the angle, assesses the gravel, observes how the waves recede. Then, she carefully pushes the young to the water's edge, just so it feels the hard under its body, overcomes the instinctive fear of land. Then, she herself shows with full force, and only then comes the first independent attempt. The first attempts can be unsuccessful. It happens that the young goes too far and gets stuck. Then the mother swims right next to it, and with her movements shows how to rock to get out. Sometimes it takes hours. This is a real school with exams that one can fail. Along the section of the coast, there live about 30 orcas. Of them, only 13 have mastered the technique of beaching. The rest could not or did not dare. This is really an elite skill possessed by less than half of the pod. The second strategy, wave hunting in Antarctica. If beaching is bravado, then this is pure engineering thought. Antarctic orcas hunt seals lying on drifting ice floes. The problem: reaching the seal directly is impossible. The ice floe is hard, and even a very strong orca is unable to break it with a blow, but it can create waves. A group of orcas synchronously accelerates underwater about 15 meters from the floe, as close to the surface as possible, without surfacing. The seal does not see them, only dark water. At the last moment, they all simultaneously dive sharply into the depths. The movement of their bodies creates a whirl that gives birth to a wave, 1 meter and higher. The first wave breaks the flow. The seal moves to a larger piece. The orcas surround the new flow and begin methodically, wave after wave, to reduce it. They remove ice fragments that interfere with acceleration. They push the flow into the water where it is more convenient to attack. They think several steps ahead. When the flow decreases to the appropriate size, the final wave follows. The seal falls into the water. Scientists who observed this for the first time said that it was hard for them to believe their own eyes. Such a degree of coordination and foresight in an animal, as one researcher said, surpasses the level of teamwork that most human groups are capable of. The third strategy: hunting gray whales. This is the heaviest and longest operation in the orca's arsenal. A gray whale weighs 40 tons. Even for an orca alone, this task is impossible to handle. So again, the team works. The pod finds a female gray whale with a calf during migration. 2 or 3 orcas deal with the mother. They ram her, distract her, do not allow her to focus on defense. The rest deal with the calf. The tactic: not to bite, but to ram. The massive, heavy skull of the orca is the weapon. They hit the young, trying to weaken it. Then they begin to push it underwater, not allowing it to surface and take a breath. The mother defends herself desperately, but there are too many of them. Such an attack can last 2 to 3 hours, sometimes longer. When everything ends, the orcas eat only the tongue and soft tissues of the mouth cavity. The layer of whale fat is too thick to bite through, but even that is hundreds of kilograms of food for which the pod devoted hours of work. A conscious, rational choice to take what one can get to and leave. Researchers who observed the hunting of gray whales described what they saw as one of the most complex collective actions ever recorded in animals. During the attack, each member of the pod knows its role. Some attack, others hold position, others wait for their turn and change when those in front get tired. This is not a chaotic pack. This is a coordinated team in which everyone understands the common goal. The most striking thing in this hunt is the persistence. Orcas do not give up. If the attack failed, they regroup and start over. They can chase the target for hours, changing tactics on the fly. It is precisely this persistence combined with intelligence that makes them invincible at the top of the food chain. And finally, the fourth strategy, the one that surprised the entire scientific world, hunting great white sharks. The great white shark, the symbol of oceanic horror, 3 to 4 meters, powerful jaws, an excellent solitary predator. But against the orca, it is practically helpless. Orcas chase sharks in pairs or small groups. They ram the shark in the side, the blow stuns it, and then they turn it belly up. In this position, the shark falls into a state of tonic immobility. This is a reflexive catalepsy, complete immobilization, no resistance. Next comes the most incredible. Orcas with surgical precision open the shark and take out only the liver, nothing more. The liver of a great white shark can weigh several hundred kilograms and is rich in oily fat of colossal caloric value. Orcas know this and take only what is needed. The rest of the body simply falls to the bottom. This phenomenon, when fear of a predator changes the behavior of prey in the entire region, scientists call the ecology of fear. Orcas affect not only those they eat, but also those who simply know about their presence. When sharks leave a given area because of orcas, the entire ecosystem changes. The pressure on the fish that the sharks hunted changes. The distribution of sea lions changes. The behavior of other predators changes. The very appearance of orcas triggers a chain of changes for many kilometers around. Great white sharks are so afraid of orcas that after an encounter they immediately leave the hunting area and sometimes do not return for longer than a year. Researchers in the Republic of South Africa observed. It was enough for orcas to appear off the coast, and the sharks within a radius of several kilometers disappeared within a few hours. The tourist industry based on diving with sharks in these places completely died down for some time. Did you know that great whites are afraid of someone? Write in the comments if this is a surprise for you. And so we have reached the question from which we started. Why does the orca not touch humans? In the wild, there is not a single confirmed fatal case of an orca attack on a human. 0. Throughout the entire history of systematic observations. 0. It has happened that orcas swam up to divers within arm's reach, circled around yachts for hours. In recent years off the coast of Spain and Portugal, cases have been recorded when orcas swam up to sailing yachts and pushed them. At first, it frightened the sailors. Some boats were damaged, but scientists explained the matter. Most likely, it was about young individuals who were simply playing with an interesting object. Just as young orcas off the coast of Argentina practice on seaweed before real hunting, no human was hurt. Why do they not attack us? There is no unequivocal answer, but there are several hypotheses. First, humans do not fit into their food preferences. Orcas from different populations specialize in specific prey: fish, seals, whales. A human in the water does not resemble any of the known hunting objects, neither in shape, nor smell, nor sound. Second, intelligence. Orcas are smart enough to recognize humans as something separate, not a threat, not food, a different category. Third, and this is probably the most convincing, culture. If no mother has ever hunted humans, then no one taught the children this, and everything an orca knows it learns from the family. Hunting preferences, strategies, dialect, everything is passed from generation to generation. The tradition of not attacking humans could have formed just like any other tradition of the pod, and now is simply part of their cultural code. A completely different story took place in captivity. For several decades, orcas were kept in marine parks, primarily in the United States. Shows, pools, trainers, millions of viewers. It seemed spectacular and safe, until it became obvious that it was not. Cases of attacks on trainers were recorded, including with fatal outcomes, cases that never happened in the wild throughout the entire history of observations. This became the reason for a serious conversation about what is really happening with this animal behind the glass of the pool. One conclusion scientists drew quite confidently: an animal with high intelligence, complex social life, and the strongest family bonds, isolated, deprived of family, natural space, and meaningful stimuli, behaves differently than in the natural environment. This says not so much about the orcas themselves as about what happens to a highly intelligent being in conditions for which it was not created. I remember when reading about this for the first time, I caught myself thinking, this is the real riddle. Not how they hunt, but why they do not do it towards us. There in the ocean, where no one restrains them. Currently, in many countries, keeping orcas in captivity is limited or completely prohibited, and in the ocean, orcas still do not touch us, although they could. Despite all its power, the orca is defenseless against threats that have nothing to do with natural predators. Because the orca has no such predators. We created these threats. The first and most serious is chemical pollution. Polychlorinated biphenyls, abbreviated as PCB, a group of industrial chemicals that were used worldwide until the 1980s and then were banned. But in the ocean, they have not gone anywhere. PCBs practically do not decompose. They accumulate in the fatty tissue of marine organisms, and with each level of the food chain, their concentration grows. The orca is at the top of this chain. It accumulates everything. In females, PCBs partially pass to the young with milk in the first months of life. This means that every newborn calf begins life already with a dose of toxins. High concentrations suppress the immune system and reduce reproductive functions. Some populations in Europe, particularly off the coast of Great Britain, currently number only a few individuals. Scientists say directly, without changes, these populations are doomed to extinction. For several years, not a single calf has been born there. The second threat is the shrinking food base. Resident populations feeding on salmon suffer from its disappearance. Salmon is shrinking due to industrial fishing, destruction of spawning rivers, and changes in water temperature. Orcas have to swim farther and farther. Females give birth less often. Fewer young survive. The southern resident population off the coast of North America, one of the most studied in the world, currently numbers a little over 70 individuals. This is already the limit. The third, noise pollution. For a being whose entire life is based on sound, this is a quiet catastrophe. The constant noise of ship engines, military sonars, industrial installations literally drowns out their world. They cannot hunt normally, cannot communicate normally. Stress, disorientation, disruption of bonds within the pod. The fourth, accidental entanglement in fishing nets. Young individuals who have not yet learned to recognize the danger are particularly vulnerable. For a pod in which every young one is worth its weight in gold, this is a blow to the future. Currently, orcas are listed on international protection lists. A number of regional populations have been recognized as endangered. How effective the protection will be largely depends on how quickly it will be possible to reduce the level of pollution and restore the food base. Scientists and nature protection organizations are working on these threats. They reduce salmon catches in key regions, introduce restrictions on navigation near habitats of sensitive populations. In Canada, restrictions have been introduced on ships approaching orcas from the southern resident population. In several countries, marine protected areas have been created where fishing is limited. But the main obstacle, PCBs in water and fatty tissue of marine organisms, will not disappear for many decades. Even if all sources of pollution are stopped now, these chemicals are already in the system. They will circulate in food chains for a long time yet. This is probably the hardest thing in the whole topic. To realize that the problem was created over 100 years and solving it will take much longer. The orca is not just an animal. It is a mirror in which we unexpectedly see something familiar. Family, learning, mourning, culture, intelligence that could kill us and does not. And it seems to me that this says more about it than all hunting strategies taken together. This is Tomasz Zielnicki, World Without a Filter channel. If this material was valuable to you, leave a thumbs up, share it with someone who should see it, and subscribe if you have not already. See you in the next episode.